And welcome to day 2 of Radio Week, wherever you are watching in the world. Thank you for joining us. It's good of you to be here. It's going to be an amazing panel today. I'm sort of setting this up. It's going to be an amazing panel. It better be, guys. It's all up to you. We're talking about data analytics today. And in 2006, before I introduce everybody, a little bit of context. 2006, a mathematician called Clive Humby called data the new oil. And he said that just like oil, its use is limited if it's unrefined. Insights derived from data can be used to retain customers. It can be used to enhance their experience of your brand, product, or solution. It can help develop new revenue models for your business. It can help advertisers understand your audiences and segment them in new ways in order to serve them better with more relevant advertising. And now we know that for the last maybe 5-10 years, mega tech platforms, the Metas, Amazons, Googles, have harvested enormous amounts of data, and they've been using it sometimes without our permission. And that's why regulators have had to intervene to make sure that our data privacy is protected better. But let me say that radio has been a little bit behind the curve. So how are we fixing that? That's what we're going to talk about today. This is a panel sponsored by Audience, and Audience are specialists in data management. And joining me in the panel today to discuss all of this, Creighton Green, who's co-founder of Audience. It's an analytics and insights platform that helps brands capture, enrich, and activate first-party data. Melissa McNally, research and analytics manager at Kagiso Media Radio in South Africa. Tapas Sen, who's chief content officer at Mirchi in India. And Chris Williams, former GM and chief product officer at iHeartMedia. Thank you so much for your time, all of you. I know particularly in the US, super early, but you look bright, like you've washed your faces, which is a great start. And then a little later in India, Tapas, but thanks for being awake for us. We appreciate your time. Creighton, let me start with you. First-party data. Some people watching may not know what that really is. A very succinct sort of 140-character explanation.
Perfect. It's the data that somebody volunteers to your brand. So for example, you could be a media company that's running a contest. It could be a survey, a poll, a quiz, anything that gives an opportunity for a listener or someone in your community to volunteer their first name, their last name, their email address, and to opt in to hearing more from your brand, from the station. And so that first party data is the information that I've given to you, and I've trusted you with that. And now our relationship can start, and you can learn more about me. I can learn more about you. And the goal is that we build a relationship. We're connected in a way that you can better serve me with content, with ads, and with experiences. So
that's great explanation, Creighton. It wasn't 140 characters, but we'll forgive you because you are the sponsor. So all good. All good. And as an interruption, let me just remind all of you that are watching, feel free to ask questions as we go along with the session. I've got a few, but I certainly am not going to cover all of it. There are a whole range of things that you're going to want to know that I'm not perhaps going to be bringing up today. So feel free to send those questions through. We'll post them from your chat. I'll speak them out if I need to. And of course, the experts are here and they'll answer them for you. So thanks for the explanation of how first-party data works. Now, I remember when I worked in radio, the very sad thing that we used to do is whenever people entered contests or sent us their names and details, we put them in a book, and that book sort of sat somewhere and never got looked at after the prizes were delivered. So we did nothing. It had no value. We didn't see the value in it. So if you're still doing that, you're sitting with a whole lot of data on an Excel spreadsheet somewhere with your audience's names and contact details, etc. What are you missing out on? What opportunities are you missing out on? Let me stick with you on that, Creighton, and then I'm going to go on to Melissa and the rest of the team.
Yeah, it's knowing who your audience is. So if you don't have that in a place where it can be visualized, and what I mean by visualized would be being able to segment it. And so out of all of those people that have ever participated in any sort of interaction with your station or your brand, who are they? Are they my age? Do they have kids? Are they married? Do they even live in your local area? And what are the interests and hobbies? And so if it's not put in the right place, you'll never be able to know who they are, and segmentation will never be possible. And then customizing or personalizing any content like that also won't be possible. So it has to live somewhere where it's usable.
I like that you've used a couple of very important jargon words: personalization, customization. Great. I'm going to throw it to Melissa to explain how practically at your radio group in South Africa, you use it for personalization, customization, those sorts of things. Take us through practical examples.
Cool, thanks, Omar. So at Kagiso Media, we use first-party data in a number of ways. I mean, these are just some of the applications that you've spoken about. We've adopted a relatively listener-centric approach when examining our first-party data, as well as our audiences. So we use it to gain a deeper understanding of our audiences. We look at it for content generation, as well as the commercial application, which we've spoken to through the personalization, which may come in the form of API integration, bot integration as well. So what I've experienced over the years, and speaking to segmentation a little bit further, is that many marketers treat audiences with a certain level of homogeneity. And this is not necessarily the case. So by using our first-party data, we're able to understand our audiences beyond simple demographics. And we can create segments that appeal to marketers, and this allows for hyper-targetability as well. Over and above that, the content and products that appeal to our listeners that we can generate in this space. Further to this, we can delve into our audiences that exist beyond the AM/FM environment, which is becoming more and more important, to allow advertisers the chance to understand the various audiences that we have access to and to augment their reach further over and beyond AM/FM. We often use our first-party data solution to assist clients to make sure the right message lands with the correct audience at the right time, essentially generating more effective ROI and a better experience for the listener.
Chris, take it a step further now. She's given us Melissa's given us a context of how we can use this. Can you tell us in programming what it can do differently for a radio station? And Tapas, while you're waiting, I'm going to prepare you for this question. Programming and sales and how you're using it in India. That's coming next, but let's start with Chris. Tell me how you use it to create better content, if you can.
Sure. So I think the big step that maybe gets left out when people are thinking about data is we artificially create a wall between what we know about our user on the digital side and the database that we collect and all of that first party data. And we think about that in this bucket. And then we think about our broadcast experience over here. And we say, great, well, for broadcasting, we have whatever the traditional broadcast measurement tools are, Nielsen or whatever you have in your territory. And then on streaming, we go, great. And now we have our own database of that we can know our streamers better. And what we forget to do is take all of that data and overlay it on top of the broadcast and say, wait a minute, why not extrapolate what we know about the people who interact with us, whether that's through our streams and they've created a profile so they can stream our radio stations, or they've entered a contest, we've interacted with them live out in the public, and try to find the insights that we can lay on top of our broadcast radio. So as we're programming and as we're selling, we're actually more thoughtful and we can be more precise in the way that we describe our audience, the way that we target and personalize for our audience. That's the big piece, is the overlay on top, so that instead of just saying, oh, we have women 25 to 54 who listen to our morning show. That's what you got. But on our stream, I can tell you exactly who our morning show is. I can tell you what parts of town they listen to. I can tell you what parts of the country they listen to. I can tell you what other things they're interested in, podcasts or interests, where do they shop, etc. Well, that's all. That can all be extrapolated. It's as knowable because you have a way better data set from the first party data we're collecting through any of these tools, streaming, through contest collection, through any of that, on air contesting, etc. It's a way larger data set. So it's interesting that we're reluctant to extrapolate that on top of, and a layer on top of our broadcast, but we're perfectly comfortable taking this infinitesimally small group of people who are carrying a meter or filling out a diary and saying, yes, from that, we're perfectly fine extrapolating on top of our entire listening audience. So to me, that's the biggest piece, is being comfortable tearing down that wall that we've artificially created and saying, this data is a reflection of what's actually going on in more granularity on our broadcast listening experience.
So Chris, practically, they're registering when they want to listen, right? And that's not, is that registering through, you know, like everything now allows you to go through Apple, Facebook, whatever, Meta. In order for you to have the meaningful data set, do they have to register directly, or can they do it through these other third parties? What's the best way in order for you to get the right information?
Both. What we do is allow for that single sign-on flow because it's simpler for me to tap Facebook or to tap Apple or Google sign-on. And then you just need to understand, what is Facebook going to pass through to you? It's going to give you 3 of the 5 fields that you may want, but then not give you gender or not give you zip code or geography. And then just ask those questions supplementally. So as long as your registration flow is smart enough to say, I'll let you do it yourself, and you can enter your email, you can enter gender, you can enter age, you can enter geography, you can enter whatever else you want in that flow. Great, you can ask those sequentially and get all 5, 6, 7 data points that you want. Or you can create a shortcut path for your user to use a single sign-on option, Facebook, Google, Apple. But don't just accept what Apple gives you. Customize your onboarding so that it goes, great, we can skip these 3 steps, but you still have to tell me what your zip code is. So I'm not going to let you through the gate until you finish paying the toll. So using both is fine. One just allows the audience to have a shorter onboarding flow, but it shouldn't be at the cost of us having a full understanding of who that consumer is. We just need to ask those supplemental questions before we let them complete the registration.
Okay, I was going to let you go, but Larry's got a very important question. He's one of those who is watching. Give us an example, he says, of how data has modified your programming.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, listen,
and he said, please.
Say again?
And he said, please. So you have to.
And he said, please. So how are you going to say no? I mean, we absolutely use the feedback loop within our products at iHeart to inform our on-air programming. So I think we are all comfortable with using, call out research or auditorium music testing or some sort of feedback loop where we go out and we collect that information. We collect feedback about our music libraries and the songs that we play. But the audience and our products are giving that feedback all the time. They're in there thumbing things up, skipping content, adding content to playlists, deleting tracks, thumbing down tracks. We actually use that, and that helps on a station by station level. It helps us make programming decisions because it's a much larger, again, our streaming data is a much larger data set than any auditorium music test that we could do. What are you going to have? Maybe 100 people participate in an online music test maximum. I mean, you've got that in 15 minutes on your stream of people who are interacting and giving you feedback, either through completion of a song. I mean, that's a trigger. Did they not even complete the song? Is that a song that you see high bounce rates on in your stream? Are they thumbing it up? Are they thumbing it down? Are they saving it to a playlist? Are they sharing it? So we're looking at all of those data points as they interact with our streams. And that's then being fed back into the broadcast programmers. And they're using that as one of the data points that that informs their decisions about on-air programming.
So that's very important. So it could dictate burn, for example, on a particular song or playlisting. You're actually saying that there is a potentially direct correlation as one of the factors that your programmers will consider.
100%. Absolutely.
But it's better than you've ever had before because there's much more data than you could ever get before and far easier.
That's right.
And we'll come to how audience helps you do that in a sec. Tapas, I want to go to you and understand how is that working. Larry's very happy, by the way. Please and thank you. That's brilliant. Thank you, Larry. Really polite. We don't get listeners like that usually. Sometimes they're not that polite. Tapas, tell me about how that's working in India. How evolved is a data strategy at Mirchi?
Okay, so let me tell you, see, every geography has its own challenges, right? So now in India, and let me tell you about Mirchi, that we just love data to the extent that in one particular year, our market research expenditure was more than that of Lever on a turnover ratio basis, of course, So we are in love with data, far more than most media companies in India are. Having said that, I think one of the things that, let me just add a layer to the conversation here, which may be a little contrarian to what's being discussed here, most of the discussion is around digital radio. In other words, not digital transmission, but something that is being streamed. Let's talk about traditional radio, okay, which is free to air traditional radio, which Melissa, even you yourself are very, very familiar with. Now, in that case, the interface with the listener is very, very limited. Okay, contests is something that you brought up. Now, here's the problem, and I'm sure people who are from traditional radio would really appreciate this. When you do contests, it is always 1% of the total audience which is actually responding. And it is always the same 1% which responds to contests. In fact, that's a big problem, because whenever you do contests, it eventually happens that it's almost the same guys who are calling up and the same guys who are winning. It's a huge challenge for radio managers, because how to have a variety in the winners. So it's just that same 1%, and even if you were to analyze this 1% as a data sample, you can't extrapolate it to the remaining 99%, because it's a unique 1%. So that's a huge limitation in terms of application of the data, in terms of actionability of the data. So that's a problem with geographies which are running radios without a digital backbone, traditional radio. Now, in terms of programming, it's now from selling point of view, okay? Even if I get to know my audience very, very well, in the sense that through various researchers, I get to know. Let me give an example. My midday is heard by 20% students, 20% women, and 25% people who are driving cars, right? Now, I can't take this data and sell it. Earlier, I would go to a woman's product and say, hey, listen, because it's India and the listenership number is very large. 20% in absolute terms is a huge number. Let me give you an example. Just Delhi city, my midday show is heard by 7 million people. Okay, 20% of that is 1.4 million people. So I go to a woman's product, seller, and says, hey, listen, 1.4 million people are listening to it, even if it is 20% of the audience. Earlier, he would be very happy. Now he says, hey, listen, I have options where 100% of the listeners are women, right? And that's exactly what Chris and Creighton are talking about, that, you can really, really understand your audience to the extent that you can offer a very particular slice to the audience, right? In programming, of course, and Chris touched on this, it's something completely different, because in programming, you are largely, it's in the sense that you're already defined by what your radio station is. If you're a jazz station, you're going to play jazz, right? So even if you get a lot of feedback saying that, hey, listen, I want country, you won't do that, right? So to that extent, I think we have been using data to tweak our programming. But our sales strategies, unfortunately, in a traditional radio setup, there is very limited help from a data point of view. But I'll come to the digital part later as we go along in the conversation.
Okay, so a couple of interesting challenges that you've posed that we want Creighton in particular to address. You say it's a challenge for sales, right? So let's pose that challenge and understand how, Melissa, perhaps how you're dealing it, how your teams are dealing with it. Creighton, how other teams that you work with are dealing with the sales challenge. Ask the question as you will. Tapas, you're saying that, if I'm framing this correctly, let me just make sure that we're communicating this. You're saying the sales challenge for you is difficult because 20% of your audience might be women, but the advertiser says, well, I can get 100% of women with. So your slicing isn't helping you because it's only a portion of your audience, which means you've got a discount by 80% because they're only 20%.
The overspill of 80%. Also, the problem is that the credibility is because it's a sample research, right? For me to say that 20% is women, the credibility is far lower than what Creighton would say, because Creighton is a digital medium. He knows exactly how many women at this point of time are listening to it. My company also has the Spotify of India. It's called Gaana. Where we know exactly how many people at what point of time did they enter a song, leave a song, what did they like. And that's the reason, if you hold your Spotify in front of you and if I hold my Spotify in front of me, they both look completely different because it's based on your past behavior. So, yeah.
Okay. And you're not doing the overlaying that Chris was talking about. You're not overlaying app data onto your morning show so that you can strengthen the argument, as it were?
My app is a non-radio app because of royalty issues in India. We are not being able to stream music on the app. So that's another very geography-specific challenge,
Right.
which very fortunately in America. I mean, we stream in America, and we have 3 radio stations in America, in New Jersey and in San Francisco. We don't have that problem at all.
Right.
It's just fantastic. So I totally get where what Chris and Creighton are saying, but it's a bit of a pipe dream for us at this point of time.
Let's start with you, Creighton.
I'm going to take a couple steps back. There's kind of a lot of little topics that we hit there. When we first got into this space 12 years ago, we started working with television stations, radio stations, and the number one request that we always got was help us build our Twitter followers, our Instagram, our Facebook. And that's all anyone cared about. It was this vanity metric of we need the most Facebook likes of anyone in our market. And so we're going to use contesting. We're going to use these giveaways, and we're going to use sports challenges and things to increase the number of likes or followers. So for years, that was one of those metrics that everyone was chasing. The downside is no one ever owned that audience except for Twitter, Facebook, etc. And now we're in a place where we've all seen the challenges of the algorithms of, when you post, who's even seeing it. And it's become a little bit of a pay to play game of you may have 1 million, 2 million, 5 million Facebook likes and, used to be fans, but you're not able to talk to all those people. And so what needs to happen from the traditional radio side to the digital radio side is how can each station, each brand own their audience? And what is that incentive? It may not always be a contest. It could be a poll where you're asking a question and you want opinions. It could be a survey of where is the best pizza in town. You can get really creative on ways to incentivize people to opt in and be part of your audience that you own. And once they're in, once they've either registered, given you an email, and slowly, you're collecting more, then that's when there's more value, I would say, for sales, for the programming side, is really thinking through that strategy of, okay, why would I give my information to a radio station? And what would get me to do that? And then do you have the tools and the strategies to collect it and do something with it? And so I think a lot of, the different age groups and demographics and the challenges that come with how do I get that demographic to connect with our station or to opt in for our emails, our SMS, our push alerts in our app. And that's where incentivizing that capture and that reward marketing becomes really important to figure out, all right, this is the offer, the experience, the question that's going to get someone to opt in. And that's really where strategy needs to go. Like if anything comes from this 1 hour of this chat, it is that how do you own your own audience and how do you build it in a way that it's going to benefit all sides of your business. And so that's the challenge, but that's what this conversation is about. But owning it is key because for years we let Twitter, Facebook, etc. own the bulk of that audience.
Tapas, you wanted to respond directly to that, but I know that what Creighton's just said is that it doesn't have to be for, I remember we used to call them the prize pigs. I hope they're not listening now, but the ones who are only interested in the prizes and nothing else. But he's given you an idea that this has to be part of a strategy so that you can broaden who responds. Your incentives have to be different. What were you going to ask about though, Tapas?
So Creighton, it's radio traditionally has always been a lean back medium as compared to the internet, so to say, which is a lean forward medium, right? And therefore, people, like I said, 99% of the people don't want to really interact with it. Forget about giving data. They just want to lean back. Half the time they're driving, right? So it's that only 1 or 2% which is really going to call up and give you the data. So at best, you have access to the 2%. Having said that, I totally agree with the fact that you have to bring in digital players to kind of to make it happen. So therefore, what we have done is we completely understand that you have to own the data. That's how we've had our own app now. Okay, and in that app, we have all the jocks. Now, each of those jocks, each of them have about, some of them have 4 million followers, some of them have 2 million followers. The total, so our station handle has 55 million followers. Okay, and therefore we have now moved from the business of doing just radio, and we have turned this into one of the businesses. Right? We are no more just a radio company, which says, my name says Radio Mirchi. The radio has been dropped 2 years back. It's now only Mirchi because it's a content company, right? So we now have an app. We now have 130 jocks who are 130 influencers. We are selling them regularly to Nestle and Mercedes, right? So we are saying that, hey, listen, it's not just about putting your ad on the radio. My breakfast jock is also going to talk about it and going to post it on his FB handle, which has 4.3 million, the breakfast jock, right? We are also going to do an activity, so because we have about 4 or 5 legs on which our entire strategy stands. So I completely agree there, Creighton. The only point that I was trying to make was that in radio itself, it is just that 1% which is going to be responsive to, because it's a lean back medium, to give you any data. But streaming is different, like you rightly said. So that was my limited point.
Melissa, Chris, jump in and challenge it. Yeah.
Just real fast. The one thing that it's not challenging it, but I think that you can expand that 1%. And we were really successful in doing that because absolutely and I'm so glad to know that Prize Pigs is not I thought that was really just a kind of a US only phrase, but it's amazing to know that that's a global concept of that 1 to 2% who constantly win every single contest over and over again. But what you will find and what we've found is you can expand that from that 1% to 2% to 10 to 20% of your audience who will participate. The reason that the number was so small is because we were only giving them one vehicle to interact with us, and that used to be the phone. And so, when caller 13 is going to win, there's only 1% of the people who are sitting around, who aren't in their cars, who are going to bother to pick up a phone and interact. Once we moved to texting, that number expanded. Once we allowed people to enter contesting on social media, that number exploded. Once we started using our own station sites as the registration vehicle, we not only expanded the participant pool, but then we started collecting the data. And so for us, that was a big insight, was that really we were limiting the number of people and the types of people psychographically who were participating in our contest by the way that we were operating our contest and the data that we were getting out of them. Because if you're just doing caller 13, really, your jock only has time to get the data from the winner and to put it in the contesting platform. That's not a data collection strategy. That's a prize fulfillment strategy. Once we moved off of using SMS as a primary or some of the other less scalable solutions as a primary vehicle for contest entry, and we started doing contesting that drove people to our sites, drove people into our app, and had them enter that way, suddenly we started building much larger data pools with much more knowledge about the audience. And the reason that was so important, it's not just, Creighton mentioned, the Twitter and vanity goals of the, early 2000s. It used to be kind of like database collection was just a vanity metric too, because no one knew why the heck they were even trying to build a database. But we have been, I've been in radio for 3 decades now. I spent 2.5 decades not standing on the shoulders of my past success. I did a huge Q1 contest. It was really successful. Our ratings went up. A lot of people participated. It was amazing. And then in Q2, I would start over from scratch with no way to tell the people who participated in Q1 that we were doing something new and exciting and another way for them to engage with the radio station. So the building of those databases and the understanding of who is participating allows you to re-invite that group back to the community. Something else is going on. Get back over here. And then you stack the Q2 people on top of the Q1 people, and then each quarter. And that was a huge difference maker, was the ability to start using that database to set new appointments and reinvite the audience that we know they're prize pigs, but it's a bigger pool of prize pigs now. It's not just a 1% pool of prize pigs, it's a much larger pool of prize pigs, but we can now get them back in Q2 and then in Q3 and start standing on the shoulders of each of those quarters' success.
Yeah, definitely, Chris. I think you've touched on a couple of important points. For me, it's around looking at the engagement techniques. How do we engage these individuals effectively to get in that kind of data as well? And how do we pick the right kind of data points and bring that into a DMP, or it might be a CDP that we're looking at specifically? And how do we augment that data going forward that we can keep retargeting those individuals and growing that database? So those are some of the conundrums that we're faced with at the moment. And how do we build out those ecosystems over time? And treating each of those points in our media ecosystem differently as well from a strategic perspective, because it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. So a lot of the time we see this blanketed approach into the ecosystem, and we hope we're going to win, but we don't necessarily win, and we don't get the data that we wanted, and we wonder why. But over and above that, we've also got to challenge segmentation models, especially that marketers are using right now, as well as our stations, for instance. And it's not going to be demographics-based only. We're going to have to start looking at values-based segmentation, psychographic segmentation. And this is where we start to get rich data that we can inform these strategies quite differently, where we see new audiences moving as well in terms of their mindsets and what's actually going to align with them in terms of a brand over time, or whatever might have influence in their purchase decision process. So there's a lot changing in our ecosystem right now, and we've got to start adapting to that and evolving accordingly with all these different techniques.
So firstly, Melissa, because we have to assume that people are daft like me, maybe they're not, but CMPs, DMPs, just explain what those are as you mention them.
Yeah, data management platforms, essentially, at the end of the day. It's where we keep our data, how we store our data, and how we can retarget at the end of the day. So this is essentially where our data will be housed, and then also a customer data platform or data management platform. And it's where our data is actually housed, and then how we can retarget it as well. You get different solutions. Some places will have them internally, and they'll have a big enough workforce to actually work on that. Or you might have it housed in a cloud through a supplier. It depends how you do it. But that allows us really to reach our audiences and harvest that data and use it most effectively over time. And once again, also to get that individual level response data, but obviously within legal parameters and frameworks.
So just a couple more questions that emerged from what you were saying. In order to know more about mood, in order to know more about behavior, obviously you have to engage more. You're not going to get that from a first response as people give you their information, right? I'm assuming there are other ways that you're finding out more about them in order to be able to. Is that because you're matching it with third-party data, or you're actually getting that directly from these people? And if so, how are you getting so much more information?
We definitely getting it directly from our listeners. We have polls, surveys that we create to get that kind of level of engagement. We've also figured out ways of doing it in a fun way, so it's more interactive for the listener to create more engagement. So we also run quizzes and we collect that information, and we see relatively high response rates coming into our database. But what's really interesting for us is that we're able to match it back to the individual over time, so we have more information. So going back to the point where we're going to be able to understand, are they interested in insurance products? What music are they interested in as well? Over and above that, do they have 2 kids and a dog? What's their dog's name, age? So we know how to personalize all the content that comes to them as well as what we're serving to them in terms of advertising.
And is this solving Tapas's other issue, which is, you brought a lot of issues, Tapas. Is this solving the issue around FM only, because he doesn't have a parallel app that is time bound around the music show that he can say, these are the listeners that in the morning show, these are the listeners in the afternoon drive. How are you doing this? How are you matching back to when they listen?
So we can create the segmentation in the actual data. So we can create morning show listeners from the information that we actually obtain. And from that segmentation, we can target those morning listeners with content that is relevant.
But are you
And
getting
then
from a digital platform? Are you getting that from a digital platform?
we're getting that from a survey-based platform. And it might be from an entry mechanic as well that we create on air that we feed through into a bot. So we collect the information from there. Then we've also got our ecosystem where we can get more information out of to augment those audiences and generate further insights. To Chris's point, it's about generating those insights over and above what you're getting, because data is meaningless until we actually have an understanding of what's happening with the audience. So at that point, we use all those data points to start to understand the individual as well as segments over and above that.
Okay, I'm going to pause there because Daniel has given us 2 comments. Let me first say the last bit that he's put in. When he was in radio, great that you were, Daniel, taking requests and talking to the listeners provided a lot of info. So there is you could, but I mean, the problem with that is scaling, right? Because individual conversations with 5 million people like Tapas needs to talk to is extremely difficult. So we get the issue. But if you've got a small 30,000 station, maybe over 10 years, you can get all of that information on a one-on-one basis. The problem is scaling. And then then the other thing, sorry, someone wants to comment on that.
Yeah, not only that, the thing is that the actionability of this information is very limited, in the sense that I get to know a few listeners, I talk to them, and it is great. And it's very good content on radio while I'm speaking to the person. But then how do I action that information? I am constantly getting callers who say that in your morning show, why don't you play some nice old retro music? Now, I'm very, very tempted to, because I love that. But the problem is that I'm hearing that only from 20 people, of which, of 20 people out of 25 who called up. So that's a massive 80% people. But that 80% is only of that very, very small sample, So the actionability of this information, of this data, I find it a little limiting.
Right, absolutely. So the other thing that Daniel brought up, and while I'm going to read out what Daniel, the second thing, or maybe we can flash it on screen, it looks like quite a bit. I want you guys to think about real case studies for sales, successful sales proposition that was derived from this kind of data mining, first-party data mining that you guys have done. Please come up with those examples. So Daniel's other question, is first-party data, there it is on screen, strictly volunteered data, or is it mined data? For instance, taking first-party data like user, city, etc., then mining social media to get more info. So that's where the matching of first-party and third-party, I think, is what we're talking about there. Creighton?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's actually, I don't want to complicate it, but there's also a lot of people that are using zero-party data as well. When you look at the different definitions, there's I'll just say, like, you'll realize there are use cases for all of it. But you have to start out, just so that it's accurate, you need to start out with some unique identifier, right? Is that my email address? Is that my phone number? Is that like a registration user ID in your app? And then you build upon that. The most accurate data is going to be the information I give you. The other information, some of that's going to be assumed based on maybe something that I clicked on, or another platform where, years ago, maybe my preferences have actually changed since then. But yeah, so the idea is volunteer data is I'm giving you at least that initial little bit, but it's incredibly powerful to marry that with other types of data to see that bigger picture. And there are a lot of great tools and also, I guess, pipelines of data that's out there. It can get expensive, and I would just say for most, some of the most actionable and accurate is, of course, the information that I'm telling you, that, hey, I've got 3 kids and this is how old I am, this is the area I live in, because there's a lot of data. I mean, I know that me personally, I get a lot of direct mail to my house, and I see a lot of ads, and I get a lot of emails that I don't think they really know me based on the content that I get. Some of it's kind of funny, actually, that somehow they made those connections inaccurately and wasted money on me.
I've got a curveball coming a little later, but before we get to that curveball, let's understand whether any of you have come up with an example, a real, proper, practical example of a sales proposition that was developed through this great segmentation we're getting, through understanding our audiences better. And then we'll get to another question from Zain Derbyshire. Go ahead, anyone.
So I think I spoke about this earlier when we were dealing with Mercedes, and so Mercedes is always very reluctant to come onto radio because there's not enough. They're looking for very, very high-end clients, right? Well, once we started our app, okay, then we could know exactly who are the people who are coming for the podcasts, etc. And then we did a cross match between our radio listenership audiences and the people who are coming onto the app. What is the source, right? And we identified, and because in India the advantage is every data is big data, right? So whatever samples we create it has a certain degree of credibility to that extent. So by cross sampling that, we found that almost about 70 to 80,000 people, less than 100,000 people, who are listening to radio travel first class, right? So we went back with that data to Mercedes, saying that, hey, listen, radio, this is the kind of data that these are the kind of people who are listening to your radio. However, we are not saying that just put your communication on radio, because that would be probably a 98% spill, right? So we said that, listen, let's do an activity on the app, and I'm going to do footfall. So I'm going to push through radio, which is a mass media, into the niche media. So it's a bit of a synergy. Radio has the numbers, right? And I can push those numbers into your activity, which could be a physical activity, which we actually did for Mercedes, as well as we did some activity for them on the app. We had a small Mercedes icon. So that particular day, everybody's icon changed to a Mercedes, So it's just gimmicky stuff. But we pushed a lot of people from radio, even those who were not flying first class, but it was just created a lot of noise around it. So the synergy between a physical event, an app event, and radio actually cross-promoting the other two events. So a lot of cross synergies. So
what did Mercedes want? What was their objective with this and you?
Oh, so Mercedes was launching their entry level, their A level.
Okay.
So they wanted young executives, young successful executives who have a high-end car, but they want to move. So they wanted to make them jump from their last high-end car to an entry-level Mercedes.
Okay.
So
and how do they know that was successful? Was there some kind of measure you guys had?
Well, I wouldn't have that information, but the fact that they came back to us for 2 more campaigns and something completely different tells me that they would have done their homework. But I'm sure my sales manager would definitely have that information, but I offhand don't have that.
The fact that they came back is good enough.
Yes,
we now trust that's credible. Don't worry. It's all good.
True. Correct.
Anybody else with an example?
I've got just a really quick one.
Yes.
There's a challenge. So in working with, we're at about 4,000 different media companies. We get hit all the time with different challenges where we're just asked to help brainstorm a solution. And there was a need for a group of car dealerships. And so I'm going to kind of stay in that same world of Mercedes a little bit. And so one manufacturer was wanting to get all of their car dealerships to participate. So this is with Hyundai. So you have all these Hyundai dealerships in all these cities. You've got the main top folks at Hyundai, and they want a campaign that is national, but also local, with one goal, and that is to drive leads for their sales reps. And so they needed that data to go into a CRM for the sales reps at a local level. So the challenge was, all right, how do we use radio to get all of those people in these different cities to participate? Really, I mean, so that a lead could be created, qualified, and then sent to a salesperson. And so what the campaign was super simple. There was a large prize, a big enter to win. There's also some local prizes at the individual dealerships as well. And initially we were like, all right, let's make sure that on all of these different pages that an email can be collected, a first name and a last name. But in talking to Hyundai and the folks selling this, it was really important to get a license plate number. And that was one of the goals, is how can we get a license plate number from those that are entering to see if they had a used car that had some value that could be traded in and put into that whole play. And so the campaign was built in a way where throw in your email address, you're entered to win. If you're willing to put in your license plate, then that's worth this many, extra entries into the campaign. If that happens, then that triggers in the data a send to the CRM that car dealership uses. And so radio being the megaphone that's pushing people to the campaign, the method of entry was very simple. It was go to the website, put in your email address, and then since the main goal was we need to get these license plate numbers because then that can help us with the rest of the, the sales cycle, you can incentivize certain actions. And that's where I think we need to get creative with advertisers of finding out what is their objective and how can you then incentivize the actions to help accomplish that objective so that they do keep coming back like a Mercedes or someone. And so we see a lot of unique scenarios. That was an interesting one of we want to collect a license plate number from those that participate because then we know what car they're driving and we can marry that with other data. But that's where the collection of data, reactivating that audience that you already have, incentivizing new actions, all of that becomes really important in that strategy.
That flow also allowed for the sharing of first party data that was not in conflict with the broadcast company's database. So, as we think about the data that we own, typically our privacy policies and our terms of service wouldn't allow us just to go give that over and say, here, AT&T, here's our user database. Like you can't just hand that over because as soon as you start to do that, you're going to completely lose trust with your audience. No one's going to share anything anymore. And you're going to erode your entire business model winds up being wiped out because the users don't trust you. You're spamming them. You're not respecting who they are because you're selling them at that point. And what we're trying to do is rent. I mean, radio is we build a relationship with an audience. We rent that relationship that we've built with the audience to a third-party advertiser. That's what we're doing. The relationship's ours, and we're renting it. In the model that Creighton just said, I love using our relationships to lead gen for clients, auto manufacturers, insurance sales folks, because we get hung up in, oh my God, we need to be able to deliver X size audience. How many million people can, but, and when you go talk to the client, what you're going to find out is in a market, if you go to a car dealer in a market and say, I'm going to get you 300 qualified leads, done. You're done. They don't need 3 million. They're not looking for 3 million. They can't do anything with 3 million. If you could go to an insurance broker and say, I can get you 500 qualified leads in your territory, done. Oh my God, you are now, they're hooked. They're hooked. They're addicted to what you can offer. And so the flow that Creighton just described is something that I love the ability for us to use the megaphone of broadcast radio, send people into a funnel that we host on our platforms, but what the audience is doing is agreeing to share their data, not into your database, but into a client database in a way that starts to generate real first party leads. And so that, I mean, we at iHeart, we are an audience client. And that was one of the big, when you're talking about case studies, this is one of the biggest, most valuable tools that we were able to take out into the marketplace was that lead gen experience of being able to send people down some sort of funnel, whether that was participating in a quiz, participating in a poll that the morning show was doing, competing in a contest, and then getting into that flow and giving them incentives on why they should let us know. When are you going to be in the market for a house? Are you shopping for a house now? When do you think you're going to buy? Great. And now we're handing that off to folks who are brokering mortgages, et cetera. But the audience is agreeing to allow you to share that data. Yeah. And they're being incentivized for allowing you to share that data. And so we're using our relationship to mine our community for lead gen. And when you get down to the nitty gritty and realize that really all you need, if you can deliver 300 qualified names to that mortgage broker, sold, they're coming back, like Mercedes. They're coming back. They'll never quit you if you can continue to deliver that for them.
But I think
I'm glad you mentioned that. Sorry, go ahead,
Omar.
Melissa.
I think that the trick there, Chris, is actually about qualified leads and creating a qualified lead gen mechanic.
Right.
I think there's still a trick in it right now, and tricks around API integration directly into client systems because of legal nuances that might exist, and even trust that may not be there between broadcasters and necessarily the clients at the end of the day. So I'm wondering how you got around that as well in your markets.
Yeah, I mean, there are tools. Creighton can speak specifically to, like with automotive, for example, there is an actual database that is not our CRM that we hand off to, that then kind of picks up the ball and takes it for us to make sure that we're delivering those in the format and in a way that there's some validation, so that they're not getting garbage. Right? We don't want to be delivering, people who are spoofing their names and their emails and their et cetera and their interest. So I mean, I'll do a little tag team action with you, Creighton, on that.
Well, it has to be in real time when it's leads. Like, people want them as soon as possible, because there is that whole time to close, and a lead cools down over time. And so with integrations, and this has probably been where we've spent the most time in the last 24 months, is identifying all of the top CRMs, or the places that automotive or insurance or anyone wants the lead. And then you have also these marketing automation and marketing products like MailChimp, Salesforce, HubSpot, and that list is pretty extensive. And so what we've done in just talking to all of our customers is we've identified a very strong list of systems or platforms that data needs to get into. And one thing that we're really always trying to solve is we don't want anyone to download a spreadsheet of leads or opt-ins and email that to a client or any of. So we're trying to solve that, and we feel like, through integrations. It takes a lot of time, it's a lot of work to connect APIs, but most of them are already done. And so if there's a car dealership that uses CDK Global or Vin Solutions, or there's a whole list of CRMs that they use, then we just connect that on our end so that all of that can be encrypted. It can be sent in real time. There can be the attribution, so the CRM knows where that data came from. You get credit for that, and you don't have to worry about somebody saving a spreadsheet in their downloads file on their laptop that's at home that then, anyways, we all know how that can go. So integrations are key with data. They need it quick, and they need it to be encrypted, because there are so many policies and regulations. And I know in different countries, everyone's kind of on a different page, but we know where everything's trending, right? Everything's trending to giving a little more, power to the consumer, where it's their data and we need to protect it. And so that's on all of us to make sure that's happening.
Absolutely. So here's the curveball. You mentioned, Chris, that you can give a fantastic qualified lead to a particular customer, 300, maybe even 3,000. But we're up against these monsters who, as we know, I'm sorry, I'm calling them that because I'm a user of Google and I'm a user of Facebook and I'm a user of Amazon, but they've got troves of this data at scales that we can't even contemplate. Even in India, you've got these lovely numbers, Tapas, but Meta and their Facebook is just astronomical. That's the huge 900-pound gorilla. How do we then remain relevant to those customers? Or do they just say, well, the CPMs are cheaper there, plus I've got access and I can slice and dice this stuff, and that's my only solution. I don't need you guys. I'm just throwing it out there, guys.
Oh, okay. So there are certain things which Facebook and Google can never deliver. For example, let's say my breakfast job. Okay, I own him, right? And he is supremely popular in the city, right? So and there is no way you can get through on his handle, whether it's Twitter or FB, without going through me. Number one. Number two is that what we do is essentially, like I said, we have stopped selling only radio. There's almost a ban. Okay, it's a solutions thing, right? So radio, and I'm going to borrow Creighton's term. He used this lovely term called megaphone. That's exactly what we are doing. We are doing all the activities at various places, right? And then we are just megaphoning it into the funnel. So it's really not. There are lots and lots of unique offerings that a local media company will have that Google and Facebook will not have. By the way, Google and Facebook are huge clients of Mirchi. So because for example, Tinder, we did a huge campaign for Tinder because one of our jocks had said that I am going to be single for life. Okay, so Tinder went after him, and it was kind of a Tinder challenge. And this guy went around town asking people to teach him how to use the Tinder. So we went to girls in marketplaces, and we carried that in live video, which was an FB Live. And of course, it was also there on an app later. You could interact with the guy. So all platforms were brought in together. And this has taken us 5 to 6 years of really intense planning and strategy to bring this together so that they all sing the same song. For us to take a strategic decision that we are not going to sell only radio ever was one of the biggest strategy transformations that happened in the organization. So where you can't compete with numbers, you compete with quality.
I think that's a great answer.
It is. The other thing that broadcast radio does, I mean, Tapas kind of alluded to it, but I'll double down on. We have a relationship. We built trust. Right. If you want to find a restaurant to go eat, you can go Google and figure out a place to go find a restaurant. But the intent at that point came from you. What broadcast radio can do is say, hey, this Friday night, if you're looking for a great date spot and you want to take someone out, boy, have I got a recommendation for you. This is a great restaurant. And a friend just told you about a restaurant. I didn't have the intent. We can help influence intent to behavior that wasn't already there. Google can help you once the intent exists and you're searching for a solution. Sure, absolutely. That's a great product and I use it every single day. But who's planting the seeds of that intent? And who's doing it that you trust? If you have a best friend who tells you about restaurants you should go eat at, and every time you go, they're horrible, you're never going to go again. They've lost their trust with you. We've built the trust. Our morning shows, our on-air talent, they have a relationship. I listen to them in the morning. They make me laugh. I trust them. I feel like I know them. And if they make a recommendation to me, I'm going to follow up on that. And that's why endorsements are so powerful. That's why live reads are so powerful. That's the entire podcast business model was built around taking radio endorsements and doing them on demand, And so that's what broadcast can still do, is help to create intent where intent didn't exist. And so that's something that we can't forget about. And the second piece is you can target yourself out of oblivion. If you're BMW and you say, I'm going to target all the way down to only people who are interested in buying a BMW in the next 4 weeks, that's a super small pool of people. And once you've mined them, you're done. Whereas if you open the aperture to people who haven't started thinking about buying a BMW yet, yes, some of that's going to be spoilage, but some of it's going to plant a seed, and it's going to continue to make sure that the top of your sales funnel stays populated with people who at least are in the consideration phase. So you can get so narrow in your targeting that you wind up hurting yourself further down the road because you're not starting to create that thought, that initial, wait, it's probably about time for me to think about getting a new set of tires. Somebody has to plant that seed for you. And so I think that's where we need to make sure that we communicate to the agencies and advertisers that that's what we can do. That's what broadcast radio is great at. That's what we can use, the relationships that we've built with our audience, and rent them out to start helping influence future intention.
That's a beautiful way to end. Beautiful way to end. Tapas?
No, I just want to make a comment. I completely agree, because trust is something which particularly the big giants, or the monsters as you call them, you can't compete. It's something that we have literally developed a penny a day, literally one listener a day. And
Right.
it's our biggest asset, so yeah.
Absolutely. Phenomenal place to end. I'm sorry, Zain Derbyshire, we couldn't get to your question. It's a technical question. We'll help you figure it out at some point. But for the moment, I just want to thank all of you guys. This was superb to listen to you talk with such passion, such energy, and of course, conveying your wisdom. Creighton, thank you for making it possible with audience, and strength to you and your team as you continue to work for the sustainability of radio businesses through the software and through what you're creating. We appreciate it. Thanks. Let me go through each one of you. Creighton Green from Audience for making this panel possible. Melissa McNally joining us from Kagiso Media in South Africa, giving us some great insights about how you use first-party data. Chris Williams, formerly of iHeart, and Tapas Sen from Mirchi. I won't say Radio Mirchi because that's not anymore in your title. And all of us who run radio businesses know that we're not just radio businesses anymore. Digital makes it possible for us to be much, much more. And most importantly, like all of you said, we have trust, and long may that last. Thank you very much. Have a great day.